Rubank Elementary for Flute, Lesson 4. In today's lesson, we introduce a dotted half note or a dotted minim, and we introduce a handful of new notes. A dot, when attached to any rhythm, adds half of the original note's value to the original note. So a half note is worth 2 beats. Half of 2 is 1, add those together and we get 3. So a dotted half note is worth 3 beats. Exercise 1, you will notice that we have a half note and then we have a quarter note tied together to create a note worth 3 beats. So we don't retongue the second note in that bar. Exercise 2 sounds exactly the same as exercise 1, except instead of writing out a half note and then a quarter note and tying them together, it simply adds a dot, which tells me that this half note is now a dotted half note and is worth 3 beats. Exercise 3 swaps the rhythms around a little bit. Doesn't add our tied notes in, it uses all dots, but does change the rhythm around a little bit. So exercise 1 and 2 sound exactly the same. So this is them. 1, 2, 3. Now you'll notice that the writer of this book has placed the bars directly above each other with a dotted line between the two to sort of show you how the dotted note fits in with what we already understand. Okay, now for exercise 3. 1, 2, 3. Exercise 4 is an interval study. Now an interval is the distance between two notes. So this interval study goes through all of the notes that we know and put them in funky different combinations or across different intervals. Now this sort of exercise is quite challenging because when we learn music, we learn it in stepwise movement. We learn a G, and then we learn an A, and then we learn a B. We simply just remove a finger. All of a sudden, in this interval study, we're going from a G to a C. So instead of moving singular fingers, we have to move multiple to play what's on the page. This is a little bit more challenging because it's not how we learnt to play the notes originally. And so it's a different sequence of notes. So let's give exercise 4 a go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this piece again has our repeat at the very end of the piece, which tells us that we need to replay the whole piece twice. I'm going to play it again once more, but this time I'm going to increase the speed. 1, 2, 3. Star this one if you're finding it difficult and come back to it in a little while, maybe a week, 2 weeks or a month, and see how much easier it is. Exercise 5. Now in this exercise we are extending our range. In other words, we're going to start playing higher notes. We have our G, our F, our E and our D. Now our G is exactly the same as the low G, 3 fingers, thumb, pinky, except we need to change the air direction. If we were to get the low G, we want to direct the airstream down like. To get our high G, our fingers don't change. we want to direct the airstream up. Imagine blowing air through the top of your head. I know it sounds silly, but try raising your eyebrows. For some reason, that works. I think it may be because when we raise our eyebrows, these muscles in this part of our face actually goes up. And therefore, the airstream, which is down here, is suddenly being pushed up. Using slightly faster air is also important. However, what we don't want to do is get into a habit of just pushing as much air through as we can to get that higher note. So if I was to do that, my low note, my high note, doesn't sound as good. Yes, I got it eventually. Yes, I even got a higher note than the one I intended, but it didn't sound very good and it wasn't controlled. So make sure that you're changing the air direction rather than just pushing more air through to get a higher note. So that was our G. 3 fingers, thumb, pinky. To get our F, it's the same as the low one. 3 fingers, add the 4th, pinky and thumb. Our E, we literally add the next one. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, pinky. And then our D, this is the one that changes a little bit. From our C, we use the 1st finger and the pinky. These are the 2 fingers that we don't want on for our D. So our D is 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, thumb, no pinky, no 1st finger. So let's give exercise 5 a go, extending the range. 1, 2, 3. Now, it might take you a little while to get to that speed, so feel free to play it slowly. Now, once you've figured out a note and you're playing it, make sure you're looking ahead, preparing for the next note. If you don't do that, you're going to get to the next note and you're going to be like, oh, what do I need to do? And then it'll be gone. So make sure that you're always looking ahead. Exercise 6, first duet. Now, a duet is when 2 people play at the same time and they're playing the same song together. Now in this duet, if you don't have somebody else to play with who can play the top line while you play the bottom, then try and play your part against my recording. That is an awesome challenge to see how well your rhythms are staying in time, and also it'll give you an idea of what it's like to play with another person even when you're at home. So first duet, exercise 6. I'm going to play the first part or the top line first. 1, 2, 3. And now for the second part. 1, 2, 3. Now, in order to play that duet, remember, you can play it against the recording, so you're playing with me. And now, exercise 7, lightly row. 1, 2, 3. Couple things to remember, quick reminders. Make sure that when you're tonguing, you're going ta, ta, ta with a sustained note. Don't go ha, ha, ha. Breathing, aim for every 2 to 4 bars. That would be where the end of the phrase is, at the end of every 4 bars. And 2 bars is a semi-natural place to take a sneaky extra breath if needed. Now these notes are quite hard, and this lesson does introduce a lot of high notes all at once. This can be extremely challenging. If you're struggling to get those high notes, don't worry, it is normal. It is all about the mouth and directing the airstream, getting it in the right place and making sure that you've got air support fast enough to make sure that you're going to get those notes. So keep at it, keep working at it, pick your flute up, put it down, come back to it multiple times a day, and experiment with your embouchure or your mouth formation and how you're using the air. All of these things will help you understand how you need to hold your body to get the notes that you're wanting to get. Final exercise for this page, exercise 8. 1, 2, 3. Now again, this is a study where we've jumbled the sequence of notes. We're no longer moving in stepwise movement. And therefore that makes it a little bit more difficult because that's not how we've learned these notes and it's not what we're expecting. So our brain wants us to do one thing, the music is telling us to do another. One other tip that I would like to give you is my C to D challenge. Now moving from a C to our D involves all of our fingers changing. So our C, we're using our first finger and our pinky, our D, everything else. Now this is quite a challenging note change to master because there are so many fingers changing. And if you don't move the fingers together, you might get a couple of extra notes in between the two. So my challenge for you is the C to D challenge. So what you need to do is you need to play a C and then a D, and then the idea is to see how fast you can make those changes. First up, just try it tongued. So in other words, you're stopping the air after every note. Challenge 2 is to slur between the notes. Now slurring between the notes really highlights wherever our fingers aren't moving together because we'll get a couple of extra notes between our C and our D. So it should sound something like this. And then the idea is to see how fast you can do it. So that is a great thing to master because that I think is one of the hardest things to learn on the flute after you figure out the blowing and how to make a sound. So C to D challenge, do it for a couple of minutes every day and see how quickly you can accurately swap between those two notes.